God spoke to her and said, "What's in your hand?" And she had sewing machines and sewing skills, and that's what she used to share the gospel.
Thank you for joining Mercy Today. How do mercy and compassion break down barriers and change everything? How do they bring hope? Be inspired as our guests share about the life-changing, soul-impacting work through the ministry of Mercy, Inc. and its partners. Here's your host, Dr. Dan Pritchett.
Well, we're very glad to have you on board today, listening to Mercy Today Radio. You're either listening on the radio or as a podcast, and we deliver it both ways. We get to tell the story about how compassion changes everything. We get to tell the world about the great work of Mercy, Inc. and its partners and friends, and always good guests and good topics. I invite you to just really tune in and lean in and hear what's going on today. So, in a timely fashion, we know that the world has been seized, or the word maybe rocked. The world has been rocked by the coronavirus pandemic. And it's had an impact nearly every place in the world, every walk of life, every culture, every country, every village, even down to individual families. And we're very much aware of the damage and the fear that it has instilled, and we want to be aware of it. And here's where we're going to talk about the impact that COVID has had in a particular part of the country, and I'll tell you that in just a moment. So we all have to deal with it somehow. In our country, our state, our family, our personal lives, our churches have been impacted. But how are they dealing with it in other parts of the world? You might read some news clips or, see a little bit on the news. But what about our Christian brothers and sisters in other countries where they don't have the medical services, they don't have the supply of the shots, the vaccines. So, what problems are they dealing with? I mean, they've got the same issues here. What are they dealing with? How has it affected the Christian work in church planting and disciple making, and the delivery of humanitarian and compassion services and training and good things that the Mercy does? So, and how are they doing personally, individually? The workers and their families. So one area that Mercy works in partnership is in the continent of Africa. And one of our partners recently returned there with One Mission Society, and he has some updates for us. And that's what our show is going to be about today. The title is A Fresh Report from Kenya and Uganda. So again, I want you to listen closely because we get so busy running our lives and doing our thing and doing what we need to do with the shots and the virus and the vaccines and all that. But so zooming in to our studio today is Chuck Rapp. He is the Africa Regional Director of One Mission Society, a major partner with Mercy, and doing a lot of work, was finally able to travel there, and he's got some things to report for us. So, again, a fresh report from Kenya and Uganda. Chuck Rapp, thank you so much for zooming in today, and welcome to Mercy Today Radio.
Thank you.
Have you recovered yet? Are you all got your energy back after the travel and trip and everything?
I've had a lot of experience over the years, so typically in 2 or 3 days, my days and nights are straightened back out, and my energy level is back up. So I've had a couple of weeks to recover.
Good. So, well, I want to point out that you are the, what's it called? The Africa, I lost my notes here, Africa Regional Director. Tell us what that means. What actually do you do with OMS? And by the way, I just want to continue to say that Mercy and OMS are linked at the hip. We're very much partners in ministries. So tell us about your role in the continent of Africa.
OMS is engaged in about 30 countries of Africa, of the total of 54. We have residential missionaries in 2 of those countries, but our primary work is something called village church planting.
Yeah.
We're working in 27, soon to be 29 African nations. And village church planting is simply a model where we take the training to men and women in the villages. And this year we have about 600 training centers across those 27 countries.
Wow.
And each training center has nominally about 15 students.
Okay. So what I want to point out to our listeners, Chuck, is that you're not a pastor or a missionary by trade and training. So you had a career in business, and God plucked you out of that. And I don't know the whole story, but here you are having an enormous role and influence with the wonderful people in Africa. Can you just speak to that? What does it mean to you to make that transition from business to this African continent ministry?
Well, business prepared me with a lot of transferable skills.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate coming up on 4 years ago to take an early retirement from my career in engineering and project management and a few other things. And so the way I like to describe it is for many years I've been involved in missions, but it was in the margins of my life, my spare time, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now I get to serve in, with my full strength, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I've been working with One Mission Society and with Mercy Inc. for coming up on 4 years.
Yeah. And the reason I wanted to draw attention to that, Chuck, is that listeners who are involved in business or a career or working at a job or whatever it might be, or already retired, you just don't know that God might find a way to tap on you and to draw you into His work. And it could be in Africa, it could be somewhere else. But I mean, you're just how do I want to say it? An ordinary guy. And most of the people that we talk to that are doing great work are just ordinary people that God moves around and repositions. So thank you for that. So on this recent trip, Chuck, you went there with two objectives that you told me about on the phone. So what are those two objectives that you wanted to accomplish?
I'll answer that question in just a second, but
Okay.
your comments just a minute ago reminded me of what our pastor says. He says, if you're not dead, you're not done.
I like that.
And so I still have breath in my lungs, and
Yes.
I'm still seeking to serve the Lord strongly.
Yeah.
So the two objectives of this trip, one was just to kind of inspect the work. As you alluded to at the beginning, COVID, it's hit here in America really hard, but overseas, they haven't had the safety nets of government bailouts. Many people lost jobs, businesses were closed, and our village church planning program was impacted as well. We lost about 6 months, of progress, but we were able to continue just kind of in a throttled back way.
Yeah.
So the first objective was to inspect the work. The second was just to encourage our workers. I left Africa the end of the second week of March of 2020. So it had been a little over a year since I had been there.
Yeah.
It was just so good to be back amongst friends and coworkers and to encourage folks.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure we get the two to inspect the work or to look at what's happening, and then to encourage the workers there. Okay, great, thank you.
Right.
So you told me several things on our prep talk ahead of time, and made a list here. So I thought our listeners would like these things. You had a time at a refugee settlement camp. I thought there were some great stories there. So tell our listeners about those.
Yes, we were in near Adjumani, Uganda. If our listeners Google that, you'll find that it's in northern Uganda, near the South Sudanese border. And so the refugees have fled over the last decade or so from South Sudan civil war, and they've resettled. Some of them are in actual settlement camps. Some of them are in cities, and they have the right to be there, but they don't have papers and they cannot work.
Okay.
But in the midst of that hardship, my favorite day on this trip was we left Adjumani, traveled about 10, 12 miles on dirt roads, pulled over to the side of the road, got out of the car, walked about 200 yards through just a field. And there was a grove of trees. And underneath this grove of trees was a church. And it wouldn't look like anything that we might see in our communities, but it was a group of Christ followers and worshipers. There were about 20 or 30 children on a tarp. And then the adults, and I would say there were about 40 of them, they were on benches, but they were mounted on posts that were dug into the ground, and they weren't even sawn flat. These were just round 4-inch diameter tree trunks that had been pounded into those posts, but they were worshiping strongly.
Yeah, and here in America, we get concerned about the color of the cushions on our pews in our churches. So drawing that contrast. And you had a child dedication we want to hear about with this Church Under the Tree, and we'll get to that right after the break. So don't go away, folks. We will be right back.
I'm Brad Swinford with Salem Concrete Paving. It's a privilege to partner with Mercy, Inc., who provides hope to people around the world by meeting critical needs and introducing people to Jesus. I know that through Mercy, Inc., I'm investing in God's kingdom as they spread the love and gospel of Christ around the world. So please join me in supporting Mercy, Inc. and Mercy Today Radio by praying or going to their website at mercytoday.global. Thank you.
Here is Mercy, Inc. Executive Director Doug Hoffman with another Mercy Minute.
We're traveling across Africa, working with a project called Shalom Africa. And as we travel, you see many people walking. You see many people, some people have bicycles, some have motorcycles, some are riding on the overcrowded buses, but it's very difficult to get around. We work with a group called Village Church Planners. And those village church planners are responsible for a certain area. And I was talking to one the other day, and he was asking for a bicycle because his one church he's working in is 6 miles away from where he lives. 6 miles walking is a long walk. He said, if I could have a bicycle, I could get there in a third the time, and that means I could go to another 6 miles away and plant another church. Please give me a bicycle.
What's one of the best ways to increase your market share? People want to do business with organizations that provide excellent products and services and give back to their community. As a sponsor of Mercy Today, we can help you do both, and we'd be honored to partner with you to share your story with our listeners. Let our team of seasoned business professionals help you grow your organization so that you can have its maximum kingdom impact. Visit our website and learn how to be a sponsor at mercytoday.global.
Welcome back. We are talking to Chuck Rapp, the Africa Regional Director for One Mission Society. We're hearing about the refugee settlement camp with a church under the tree. And Chuck had an amazing experience sort of on the spot with a child dedication. We're going to hear about that too. So back to you, Chuck. Continue your story, please.
Paul wrote to Timothy, he said, be instant in season and out of season. And this was one of those instant experiences for me. You know, you mentioned earlier, don't have a career as a pastor. So I seen some child dedications, and, you know, we went through that with our own children, but I had never facilitated or led one. Mm-hmm. And I showed up, and that was my assignment for the morning. And so it went well. And they appreciated that somebody had traveled from far, far away to encourage them and to pray for the children and their parents. Yeah. But as the infomercials say, but wait, there's more. Because the real highlight of that day was when we wrapped up the prayer of dedication for the children. We hiked another 50 or 60 yards to a stream. And I don't know what was upstream in the stream, but that was their baptism spot. Mm-hmm. And we watched 28 men, women, and children wade into the waters of baptism and follow the Lord Jesus Christ. Oh, my. And that was, baptisms in Africa, or baptisms in general, are always special for me, but particularly amongst the people of Africa.
Oh, yeah. And what a thrill, Chuck, because here from your business background, now fast forward up here, you're in Africa and you get to see and be a part of this. And those people are benefiting from your facilitation and training and organizing and all of that stuff. So there's part of the fruit of your labor. That's got to be rewarding.
Right. Yeah. A part that I did omit earlier is this tree was this church under the tree was a church that had been planted as an outgrowth of one of the trainers or one of the students in our village church planting program. And then to continue the story, what made that day even more special is we went to another preaching point. And this preaching point was one that I have not experienced in, probably my 10 or 12 trips to Africa. And what we saw here was a sewing center. And so there was a young lady, probably 30s, Irene was her name, and she had gathered about 15 or so vulnerable girls. These were preteens, teenage girls, vulnerable for trafficking. And her preaching point, she was teaching them Jesus and she was teaching them how to sew. Mm-hmm. And they had about half a dozen sewing machines. Not sure how she got those. She does all of the maintenance on those machines, but she is sharing the gospel with these young girls. And Irene's story really touched me strongly because her English was good. And so I was able to talk with her. And I found out that she had been educated in the capital city, Kampala, which is about 10 hours away. And yet she hadn't stayed in Kampala. She hadn't remained there and started a career or a family. She returned back to Ajamani, to that area, paying it forward. Yeah. She wasn't supported by any churches. She wasn't supported by a UN organization or anything else. This was just a grassroots initiative. God spoke to her and said, "What's in your hand?" And she had sewing machines and sewing skills, and that's what she used to share the gospel.
And the training for sewing, was that to take to market? They would make clothes or whatever the product was, and they would be able to take those to market to generate an income for themselves. Was that how that works?
Actually, it was a little bit different. They did acquire a marketable skill so that these girls could support themselves or help support their families. But the products that they make, they actually give to vulnerable families.
Ah, okay.
And so, again, there's a spirit of generosity that she and the girls had there. And it was just so impressive.
And Irene, now, it's from you telling of the story, it sounds like she made what we would consider a sacrifice, where she had now this formal training and a degree or this certificate of some kind. She could have stayed in the capital city, could have generated a good position and provision for herself, but she went back and is now giving of herself for these girls. Is that how you would characterize that?
Well, I didn't get a chance to ask her that question. In 2020 hindsight, I wish I would have. But I think what her answer would have been, it's not a sacrifice, it's a calling. That's just the spirit that she exuded, as I talked with her.
And I think people who are seeking to follow God's leading, I want them to have that same attitude. Oh, I have to give up this, and I have to go over there, and no, I get to it's a calling. And then everything else seems a little bit less important, a little bit less pressing in this life because you're following a calling. And I don't want our listeners to hear that, because whether it's Chuck who leaves his home in Indiana and goes to Africa and does all this coordinating and training and all that, or whether it's Irene that goes back to her area and gives of herself, everybody can have that same sense of calling, and it's something that provides deep fulfillment and reward and satisfaction. So thank you for that clarification. So let's go on to your Easter Sunday. You told me that you went to 3 churches. I'm looking at Moses Otin, the Pig Project, and I have down here what you already quoted about God saying to Moses. So there might be more, but let's start where you want to begin on Easter.
Yeah, Easter Sunday was special. Again, it's always special to worship with brothers and sisters around the world. So we went to 3 churches. Two actually were in buildings. One of them was a church under a tree, and the second church where we visited was pastored by Pastor Moses, whom you mentioned, and he's actually a student, again, at one of our village church planting training centers in Jinja, Uganda, which you'll find on the map on the east central part of the country of Uganda. He was our host for the day, and before we even went to the first service, he took us to his pig project. And so this is, again, something that was so impressive to me, made such an impact. So back several months ago, there were some funds that were made available through donations to One Mission Society, and we shared those across Africa toward COVID relief. And so in Uganda, most of those funds went for things like flour and rice and corn and those types of things. But there was a small amount that was shared for a development project. And the way that the supervisor, the coordinator for village church planning said is that, if you have a development project, it's sustainable. And so Moses was given some funds. He purchased 3 sows and a boar when they were piglets. He had rented space from the Catholic diocese there, and he had erected stalls or pens for these pigs. And he was so proud to show us these pigs, which were probably 200 pounders by now. Mm-hmm. And he had his business plan. He had actually been to some entrepreneurial training that we did with one of our informal partners, Synapis. So he had his business plan, and he's probably by now has bred these sows. And when the piglets are born, they will be raised, fattened up, and a full-grown pig, when it goes to market, is about $250. Moses isn't going to keep that money for himself. Those funds are going to purchase a plot of ground so that they can move from their rented facility in and build their own facility and move in. And so I was, again, so impressed that he didn't wait for a handout. He wasn't seeking help, but he's using the skills that and what's available to him, and all for the furtherance of the gospel and the kingdom.
And he had a vision, and he had a plan. And yes, I like it. It's the pig project. It's clever, but it's God just blesses that and caused all those things to happen. And so, what's the update on Moses? What's the latest?
Well, I can't tell you. I'll be talking to the coordinator and our supervisor in that part of the country tomorrow. But I can tell you that I pray regularly for the health of his pigs.
Oh yeah,
so absolutely. That they're successful.
Yeah. Well, when you look at a pen of pigs and you see a church, right? That's the way God works. He uses resources and energy and people and calling and vision and all of that, and good things happen. So we'd be interested to check in again with you down the road a little ways and see how the church is going and how the pig project is moving along. So one thing that you mentioned also, you said a number of times you had this thought. It said, in the midst of hardship, I saw generosity. What prompted that?
Right. So on a couple of occasions, when we were visiting these churches, people gave us bunches of bananas. Now, a bunch of bananas, like you would see in the store here, might be 6 of them or so. In Africa, there's probably easily 100 bananas in a bunch.
Wow.
And so the day before the Easter Sunday, we were in a church in the Sarongo district of Uganda. And these people presented us with, I looked at the picture 10 minutes ago or 15 minutes ago, the largest bunch of bananas I have ever seen. And then the following week, I was in Kenya and was sharing a word of encouragement to some people in the church. And my social media post said that it had a picture of me with the lady giving me bananas, and it was the speaker's honorarium. And just what they have, they share.
Yeah.
And that's so impressive.
And that's a wonderful spirit. So, Chuck, you said also, we're going to have to wrap it up here, but you have church planters down there who don't have a Bible. Maybe they have their own. I'm not sure of that, but they don't have Bibles to give to people that are coming to Christ or people to read the Bible. So tell us about that, and we want to offer people an opportunity to help out with that. So church planters without a Bible, what's up with that?
Well, many of these people who are planting churches are fairly new believers. A Bible in Africa typically costs around $10 to $12, but that may be 2 or 3 months worth. When people are living on $1 or $2 a day subsistence living, they don't have a lot of discretionary income. And so we surveyed our supervisor who has had the most number of nations. And we also surveyed a supervisor who has only 2 nations. And on average, about 60% of these men and women who are planting churches do not have Bibles. Yeah. And so we are taking the initiative, the effort to raise funds for that.
Excellent. A fresh report from Uganda and Kenya. Chuck, Rapp, thank you so much for zooming in today. Really great information. Folks, if you want to help provide Bibles for the work that is going on there in Africa, for church planters and missionaries and disciple makers, go to our website, MercyToday.global. Hit the Connect or Contact Us button, and we'll hook you up with Chuck, and you can be a part of what's happening down there, what God is doing. It's so important that they have Bibles to work with, because that's what our Christian faith is based on. That's how we know about God and His great love for us. Go to website, MercyToday.global. Let us hear from you. God bless you. Chuck, thanks again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
We'll be back with more Mercy Today right after this.
How do you multiply your time, talent, and treasures? By investing in Mercy Today. Whether it's going on a mission outreach halfway around the world or sharing your insights and experiences with others in our local community, our team of business professionals can help you multiply what God has given you. We can help you grow your organization so that you and your fellow work associates can utilize your talents for even greater causes as you multiply your resources to do even more. Join us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at MercyToday.global. Have you been looking for new ways to grow your organization and have a lasting, eternal impact? Mercy Today has an amazing team of business professionals that have managed small businesses to large corporations, and we want to share that know-how and experience with you. We're also committed our lives to sharing the gospel with compassion and serving the practical needs of communities around the world. Partner with us and become a sponsor of Mercy Today. Visit our website at MercyToday.global.
I just think it's so great to have people from the U.S. that travel to other parts of the country and bring back a report. And the whole goal of that is to stir up the American church and the American Christian to say, I want to have a part of that. I want to help. And so there are several ways that you can. Just go to our website, MercyToday.global. If you're interested in going on a short-term mission trip to Africa or somewhere else, those are going to be possible again coming up pretty soon. MercyToday.global. Let us know. Hit the contact form and give us some questions or some information, and we'll take it from there. So we are telling the story of how compassion changes everything. I want to thank you for listening today. And on the podcast, you can actually hear the AfterWords. So Chuck is still on Zoom, and we're going to go back and finish up that. So I am your host, Dr. Dan Critchett, wrapping up this episode. And until next time, may God help you be a part of what He is doing in our world today. MercyToday.global. God bless you, my friend. Goodbye for now. We are back, and this is the AfterWords. As you know, and I say this every time, we have the before words and the during words, and this is the afterwards. This is kind of the area where it's an overflow or a spillover or it's abundance, things that we couldn't squeeze into our regular radio scheduled time. And Chuck is still on Zoom with us, zooming in from Indiana, having a return from Africa recently, and the show is a fresh report from Uganda and Kenya. So we finished the radio portion, Chuck, talking about Bibles, and I just hope people are stirred up because no one is a member of the Christian church. No one has come to Christ without not necessarily a Bible, but without the Word of God, even if it has to be, shared verbally. But what a great thing to have Bibles in the hands of church planters in Africa. So now you said that you have a story about Bibles for Africa, and so maybe that'll prompt even some more thinking and praying and giving. So tell us that story.
So I came back home, and a few days later, I was debriefing the trip with a good friend of mine, a former coworker, and he had kind of the same reaction that you did. To what? They don't have Bibles?
Yeah.
And so Tim went home and talked to his wife and made a $1,000 donation. That'll purchase probably 120 Bibles.
Wow.
But as I shared earlier, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
I got an email from him this week. And he told me about his daughter, who is a recent college graduate, just getting started in her career.
Yeah.
And he was sharing with Allison this story. And it moved her so much that she made a donation. It hasn't posted yet. I can't tell you the amount.
Yeah.
She probably wouldn't want me to. But, without any, no arm twisting, it was just the Spirit of God speaking to them. And there may be other people who want to make a donation to help us put Bibles in the hands of these church planters. And we have been in touch with what used to be called the International Bible Society. They have a new name that I'm blanking on right now. But I've talked 2 weeks ago with their director for all of East Africa, and we are able to buy Bibles at good prices. And so we are looking at putting that money to work, and more importantly, putting Bibles in the hands of church planters.
I love the way God stirs up his people to facilitate and to make things happen. So let's go back. So that donation of $1,000 purchases about 120 Bibles. But I want everybody to understand what one Bible can do in one life. And I know they share Bibles in families and villages a lot of times, and who knows what God can do in the hearts and lives of an individual or a family or a village through one Bible. And that one donor with, I want to say only 1,000. I mean, most of us don't put that word in front of that number, but still how God raises up his people to do that. And then you have 2 Bibles. And what can those do? Now you have 120. And so, folks, if you want to be a part of that, go to MercyToday.global. Just put Bibles. We'll get back in touch with you. We'll see what it is you have in mind, and maybe you can be a major part of a person or a family or a village that really hears the clear calling of the Word of God in the Bible. So what else you got, Chuck?
Well, just a couple of updates. In a sensitive portion of a country in West Africa, this is a place that was in the news about 2 years ago where churches were burned, pastors and elders were martyred for Christ. Yeah. But out of that, I mentioned earlier, out of hardship, generosity, also out of hardship, we're seeing the church flourish and grow. And so I guess the first story that came out of those jihadist attacks is that the president of our largest denominational partner approached One Mission Society, Village Church Planting, and said, can you train these pastors who have fled from the north down to the south? Can you train them to be your trainers?
Wow.
And so for 18 months now, we have been training these displaced pastors. They have just had their third training event. They've had about 6 months where they have actually gone and are now training men and women. The report from our director was that out of those 50 displaced pastors who are now trainers in Village Church Planting, already about 250 churches have been planted. I just got that word about 2 weeks ago from our director who was there.
And I want before you go on, Chuck, I want our people to understand 250 churches. So that's not buying a corner lot and building a building and putting in chairs and all of that stuff. Maybe it's the church under the tree, but it's a house church or a small group church. 250 of those, and those are thriving. Those are all over the place. And so I just want our American listeners to understand that that's what that means, and that's happening all over the world. And I think our previous guest, Steve Doggett, said that the church is thriving in all continents but 2, North America and Europe. But where you're working and praying and giving and training, is thriving there. And in Latin America and in Asia, good things that God is up to. So I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I want to make sure our listeners understood that context for 250 churches. Right. Yes. Thank you. Well, and I recall about 4 decades ago, I heard a man say, his name was Leonard Ravenhill, which some of you may recall, but he said there are 2 things over the history of, a couple of millennia that the church does not handle well. That's prosperity and popularity.
And so, we're seeing that in Western Europe and in America, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the church is growing; it's thriving in parts of the world where it may not be so popular, and certainly it's not so prosperous.
Right.
But then to finish the story in this sensitive country, last fall, so this would have been in October, the man who oversees all of the Association of Evangelical Churches in this entire country, he had heard about our work, and he approached our director and said, our organization has a vision to plant churches in 4,000 unreached villages of our nation by the year 2025.
Oh, my.
Can you help us?
Wow.
Well, that's like saying sick 'em to a dog.
Yeah, right.
And so we have already received funding at One Mission Society. And we next week, the 15th, we begin training our first cohorts of trainers. And we're going to do 3 cohorts in 2021, 22, and 23. And as they go through, they'll be training men and women who in their first year as a student will be planting churches.
Oh, man.
And so out of all of that hardship, out of, what we would consider, a catastrophe,
right.
People losing their lives for the gospel.
Yeah.
What's the saying? The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church.
Yeah. And
we're actually seeing that in this nation.
And that's indigenous, right? Did you say that the person that approached you, does that person live in Africa? Are they a native?
Yeah, he's a native of that country. He's the president of the Evangelical Association, which is fantastic. And I love the fact that this is multiple denominations banding together, playing for the same team.
Yeah.
And and so that they've approached us, and we've been able to respond. And I'm sure that they will need Bibles in that country.
There you go. Back to that, folks. Go to MercyToday.global. Help with those Bibles. I don't want to, we don't ask for money on this, and we don't on this show, and we don't sell anything. But man, when an opportunity comes, for God to reach into a person's heart and say, I want you to help. What a great privilege that is. So we are talking to Chuck Rapp, the Africa Regional Director for One Mission Society, a fresh report from Uganda and Kenya. So any final words, Chuck? In fact, maybe I could do it this way. Well, I'd like to do 2 things. First of all, tell us what it means to you personally as having gone that transition, but your background aside, here you are every day. You're thinking and praying and talking and Zooming and doing all kinds of things for the sake of the gospel in Africa. What does that mean to you personally?
So I would say that what this means to me personally is it's an opportunity to finish well.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere, none of us know how much time we have, but I'm probably in the 4th quarter of life. Hopefully I'm not at the 2-minute warning. And so when I think about legacy, my father passed away a year ago. And so I'm kind of living in his legacy.
Sure. Right.
And when I think about my own, it's not going to be the things that I accomplish. I don't have that much time. I'm not that talented or skilled. So my legacy is going to be leveraged by the men and women that I pour into. Most of them are in Africa. Some of them are here. And so it's an opportunity to see my impact that will live on beyond me through other people.
Yeah.
And so that brings a lot of fulfillment. It brings satisfaction. It brings significance, in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that would be how I would respond to that question. It's very fulfilling.
Yeah, and you're in a season of life where you're not just getting up and going to work. There's a whole lot.
My investment advisor talks about the go, the slow go, and the no go phases of retirement.
Yeah.
I'm in the go phase. I've got strength and energy. Got up and ran 5K this morning, and so it's like I want to channel that for the kingdom.
Perfect. And I hope our people are listening to that, because whatever age you are, whatever stage in life, the go, no-go, whatever that is, God's calling you to be involved in His work, wherever, whatever that means. Because none of us can hide behind the door, right? Because He's looking for every one of us. It takes all of us to be a part of that Great Commission work. So thank you for that. And I had a note here that you wanted to mention something about the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yeah, it hasn't been reported very much here in America. If you go to BBC, you'll see a lot about the recent eruption of a volcano near Goma. That's in eastern DRC. Goma is a city of about 1 million people. I think it was 31 people lost their lives, and about 300,000 people lost their homes. I mean, the lava flow just came down and spilled out. And so Mercy is coming alongside a ministry partner, Juan Gaza, and we're providing just basic food necessities and some medicine and so forth. Again, we can't do it all, but we can leverage with people, boots on the ground, so to speak. And so that's another opportunity where people might be able to become engaged and help.
MercyToday.global. Bringing help and hope to people in the midst of a crisis, all that kind of stuff. Okay, one last thing for you, Chuck. You ready?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to give you the mic and ask you to speak to our listeners directly. What will you say to them? Say it right now.
So I would say to begin by praying, and then I'd say listen, and then I would say discern, and then I would say obey. It's not that difficult, but we just need to slow ourselves down. The Holy Spirit wants to speak to us. He will speak to us. He is faithful to speak to us. And as He does, then we need to respond in obedience. And I have no idea what God may say to you, what He may call you to do. He may just speak a word of encouragement. I don't know. Yeah. But listen, discern, and obey, as that still small voice speaks to your heart and to your soul.
Beautiful. Thus says Chuck Rapp, Africa Regional Director of One Mission Society. A fresh report from Uganda and Kenya, and something from his heart. So thank you, Chuck, again. We're closing it off here. This is the AfterWords. This will be available on the podcast, on our website, and you can put it on yours. We'll talk about that later, but that's it for now, folks. A fresh report from Uganda and Kenya. Goodbye for now.